Because it turns out the broken printer is typically like a 30-minute research decision and $500 is all it takes to get rid of it. And yet, we can't solve the broken printer problem, and yet we can call a meeting. Well, we can waste the time of 5 to 8 of our other teammates about nothing.
Yeah.
Without even knowing why we're calling the meeting.
That's
we
right.
can do it. Spend 20 minutes figuring out why we're there, 30 minutes flailing until someone's got to slide out for the next meeting, and we didn't actually get anything done. When you take the agency of interpersonal power, when you take that dimension, I can go to Andrew and say, Andrew, neither one of us like the way our meetings run. It's not doing it for us. Let's change it.
Yeah.
Like, what would we do different? And I give some ideas and team habits about that.
Today's episode of The Pro Guide is brought to you by Small Pond Productions, the producers of this podcast. If you're looking to boost your brand's voice with professional end-to-end podcast production, whether it's an interview show or telling stories with audio, we walk you through every step of the process to make you sound great. Head to our website and download the free Podcasting Made Simple guide. 8 critical things you need to know before launching your brand's podcast. It's all available at smallpond.productions. Well, welcome everybody to this episode of The Pro Guide, where we talk with leaders in business, technology, and creativity. My name is Andrew J. Mason, and today we are thrilled to be hanging out with a true productivity hero in my mind, Charlie Gilkey. Charlie's the founder of Productive Flourishing and the author of the transformative book, Start Finishing: How to Go From Idea to Done. And his latest book, Team Habits: How Small Actions Lead to Extraordinary Results. Charlie is a leading expert for turning organizational chaos into clarity, and a really cool guy with what I consider to be a lot of original thought that you don't hear in other spaces. So Charlie, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I am really, really excited to jam with you today.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. And you had one job, like keep the bar low. Now I got to rise up to, but I appreciate that.
Not to talk you up. It's only buttering you up if it's not true. So that's good. I would love to start things off with a little bit of your origin story. So for folks that just don't necessarily know, who you are, what kind of space you talk in, you go from the Army, from logistics, and I see a few of those dots, connecting into the corporate space. But was there a process? Was there a moment where you're like, I need something that just kind of makes my soul sing, and that's kind of what generated Productive Flourishing? Like, where can you give us a little bit of where the true heart of that came from for you?
Well, the true heart of Productive Flourishing came from actually my own problems at the time. And so I started Productive Flourishing in 2006, 2007, and I had just recently returned from Operation Iraqi Freedom, and I was involved in a lot of joint military logistics operations. And I was also pursuing my PhD in philosophy, so I'm an ethicist and social philosopher by training. And I ended up with this very weird paradoxes, like how is it that I can move battalions of equipment and people and do all of these really complex things, but this 5,000 word essay is kicking my butt. It seems to drag on for 12 weeks. What is going on? This doesn't make any sense to me. And so I did what any good scholar and officer would do. It's like I'm not the only person with this problem, so I'm going to see what other people have said. And then I started reading the canon, the 7 habits and getting things done and things like that. And they didn't hit for me. They didn't hit for me as a creative knowledge worker, but they actually didn't get to what I found was actually the sweet spot of Productive Flourishing, which is that messy middle. So the standard productivity literature, in my opinion, is far too granular. It just tells you how to do stuff. It's very tasky. It's very next action, and there's a place for that. And the personal development literature is really high-level, principle-based, value-based. And that's good stuff too. But most of us live in this messy world of projects. How do we do these sort of macro things? And I got tasks down, I could rock a week like anyone else, but how do you actually figure out how to rock your quarters, quarter by quarter, and tie those into the type of life and work you want to do? I didn't find much that really sang to me there. So I started writing about it and started pulling together all of these different influences, because turns out I wasn't the only one with that problem. And, I was writing about this a little bit earlier, Andrew. I started blogging back when blogging was like a fringe hobby that you didn't tell people you did.
Yeah.
Right. And so, it's sort of grown up around me, and I've been, I've contributed to how it's grown up in my own way. But it's just really great to be on this side where you can say, you know what, like for those types of problems, there was a big problem with the creative class at that time, macro speaking of the creative class from Richard, Florida. And so I just stepped in and started writing about that. And like, how do we do, not only do we do like the big projects, but the paradox that I explored in Start Finishing was, why don't we do the things we most want to do?
Yes.
Why don't we do the things that, like that soul-nourishing project, listener, you know which one I'm talking about, that soul-nourishing or that game-changing project that you're just waiting on something to do. We don't get to those. It's easy to explain why we don't, like, do things we don't want to do and procrastinate on, like, calling doctors or taking the trash out or whatever. We don't want to do it. We don't care, right? That's an easy problem. Harder problem. Why is it we don't do the things that matter most to us? And so that's what productive flourishing is, one of the paradoxes that productive flourishing and Start Finishing handled. But from my early days, the other one was, given who we are as creatures, given how we evolved, given that we typically love to be in good social relationships with other people, you would think that working in teams would be natural and easy. And yet, it is not natural and easy for a lot of people. That's interesting. If we were fundamentally hostile to each other and fundamentally spiky towards each other and things like that would be easier to explain why teamwork falls apart. But when you actually are in the field and you're looking at the fact that most people actually kind of dig their teammates at a personal level, most people want to get stuff done, most people want to win, and yet we're not, that's an interesting problem.
Yes. Yes. The sense of like ought, like, oh, well, we ought to be doing this, or, and you were talking about Start Finishing, this sense where I ought to be doing something, but it's just that space where it doesn't happen. I'd love to zoom in on that team habits segment of this, where we put so much of that emphasis on the mission, the values, the alignment. I love somebody's quote where they talk about where the mission statement's what's happening on the wall, and then the actual culture is what's actually happening down the hall. And so we have, there's my reality, there's my habits, there's your reality, there's your habits. And then there's this new kind of collective thing that emerges when we get two people in a room together, and talk to us a little bit more about why team habits.
Well, there are a lot of reasons why team habits. One reason why team habits is, I started writing, team habits crystallized in and around the pandemic. And so the pandemic was and is a catalytic moment in which all of our ways in which we work together, which I call workways, simply speaking, right, got dumped out off the desk, and we had to figure everything out on the own. So it exposed how much of work was merely subroutines and conventions. And when those subroutines and conventions got swept away, we were all like, what do we do? How do we actually have a meeting when we can't just show up to work and go to the conference room at 9:30? Like, how does that work? And then how does a virtual meeting work? And then how do we, like, if I can't see someone, this is the management problem that still is, we're playing out, is like, if I can't see someone working, how do I know they're working?
That's right.
And so all of these things were revealed at that time. And I've long done, workplace consulting, executive coaching, leadership development, team development. And time again, people will come to me, Andrew, and they'll be like, our meeting culture sucks. Can you help us fix that? And I'll say yes and no. Right. Yes, I can help you fix it, but I'm not going to fix it the way you think we're going to fix it. Right. You think we're going to go and start changing people. Right. You think that it's just going to be Andrew that we go and, like, if we get Andrew to participate, well, everybody else will.
That's right.
What we're actually going to change are the workways and team habits. And team habits are pretty simple. They're what they sound like. They're things we do as a team to the level of habits. Like, we don't think about it. A lot of them are implicit agreements with each other. And frankly, a lot of them are bad. Like, think about the CC thread from hell.
Yeah.
Right? Why do we do that? Everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say it. Like, who agrees, said, like, you know what? This is how we are going to do things, and this is how we're going to treat each other.
This is helpful. Yeah.
And yet, what do? We have an email we need to send people. As a teammate, we're like, I don't know who needs to see it, so screw it. I'll send it to everybody.
Yeah.
Send, right? And so we all spend 17 or 18, or we all spend time reading those 17, 18, if you're in a corporate space, CC threads, merely to see if you need to read it.
Golly.
Right?
That's right.
And that's a team habit, right? And so the other thing I mean very specific about team, and that's going to be important during today's conversation, is I mean the 4 to 8 people that you work with 80% of the time. So for the rest of this conversation, I'm going to pretend that Andrew and I are on a team. We work in other ways with each other through House of Leading Brands, but in this call, we're a team.
That's right.
And the thing about it is, when you think about it that way, it removes some of this like ghost friction that you could, like, my team does this. Your team is like Andrew, Angela, Charlie, and Steve.
That's
Which of them, right? Which of them are you pissed about? Which of them are doing the thing? Or is it you're all doing a thing? And I actually want to bring that personal relationship back to work, to where when I'm doing something stupid, or if I'm doing something that's making Andrew's life unnecessarily hard at work, he can come to me and say, hey, probably not meaning to, but this is what's happening.
Yes.
Can we change that?
Yes.
Right? Because again, I don't need a boss, and I don't need, like, it doesn't have to be conflict. It could just be a way in which we're bumping into each other that we can call out and improve together.
Yeah, I mean, that sense of CC threads, implicit in that is sometimes even a level of distrust. I'm here to cover my own butt here by sending this email just to make sure that everybody who needs to know about it knows about it. But on the other side of that, what you're talking about is this. I heard you're in Seth's interview. This agency, this ability to decide for yourself, but also for the good of the team. You mentioned this idea of power and thin slicing this idea of power into 3 separate segments, and how in business space, for whatever reason, we all fail to recognize that there are 3 distinct types. And sometimes we unintentionally focus on 2, and we just kind of use this term power to mean like everything. Do you mind kind of breaking that down and also talking about why this 3rd section of power is actually really, really important for teams to function well?
Yeah, so the 3 dimensions of power is what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
And thanks for referencing previous conversations about this. So there are 2 dimensions of power that we talk about all the time, and it's why so much of work conversation is fraught. So on the first set, you have personal power. So think about that personal, that's power 2. That's what I, Charlie, can do with my own capabilities and competencies and capacity and expertise. I could just move the ball by myself. That's power 2. On the other end, we have institutional power, which is power over. That's what I can do as my role and position in this company. I'm a leader, so I get to make decisions about things, or I'm a manager, I get to make decisions about things, or I'm an individual contributor and I don't get to make decisions about things. I have no power over anything. People have power over me.
That's right.
When you just focus on those 2, you end up in so much of the tension, friction, and waste of work, right? Because when it's something that I call a broken printer, a CC thread is a kind of broken printer. And I need to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
So every company every company I've consulted with or worked at has a broken printer that everybody knows about, right? And sometimes it's been there so long it has its own name. Sometimes we'll joke and give it an ID number. Like it's like employee number 3 and it's still around doing what it does. It prints funny, or it's got that stupid streak, or it's in the office manager's office and you can't get to it while she's in meetings, or it's, it's always something there and we know about it. Or it just sits in the conference room and just is a fly on the wall for every meeting that comes through. And is in the way most of the time. It's not the printer itself that's problematic. It's the downstream effects of the printer.
That's right.
It's the loss of focus when, like, you can't print out an agenda because the printer's broken, and so you're fighting with your teammates who are looking on phones and tablets and getting pinged at the same time you're trying to tell them something. Why did that happen? Because there was not a way for you to print out an agenda so you can actually have the focused attention. Or you got to give a presentation to the big boss and you just do the thing, like that printer's fine most days. You hit print, out pops 200 pages, and you realize, oh shit, it's got that streak on it. I can't show that. And you got to scramble for 15 minutes and you're not prepared for the conversation with the big boss.
That's
and
right.
She's looking at you like, what's going on here? Why are you so frazzled? And you're like, I was so prepared. Like, what happened is not you, it's a stupid printer.
That's it.
right? And so the printer is an analogy. So the CC thread from hell could be a printer. It can be the dumb way we do meetings. It's just those things that we know are broken, but we choose not to fix. And that becomes important when it comes to the 3 dimensions of power. I told you I'm going to tie this back in, because we don't use that second layer of power, or excuse me, we don't use this sort of hidden layer of power of interpersonal power. That's power with. That's what Andrew and I can do together, that we don't need a boss to decide it for us. But I can't just go blow the damn thing up by myself because it's communal property and it's business property. But Andrew and I can say, you know what? Freddie, he's been in that corner for like the last 4 or 5 years. Are you tired of looking at him too? And Andrew can be like, yeah, he needs to go. And I'm like, all right, well, let's fix that.
That's right.
And tell someone that we fixed it. Because it turns out the broken printer is typically like a 30-minute research decision and $500 is all it takes to get rid of it. And it's somehow an intractable problem. And yet, we can't solve the broken printer problem. And yet we can call a meeting and waste 5 to 8 of our time. We can waste the time of 5 to 8 of our other teammates about nothing.
Yeah.
Without even knowing why we're calling the meeting.
That's
we
right.
can do it. Spend 20 minutes figuring out why we're there. 30 minutes flailing until someone's got to slide out for the next meeting and we didn't actually get anything done. Why can we do those 2 things? It's team habits. We have a habit of allowing that broken printer to remain broken, of just letting it be okay, of allowing it to be a problem we can't solve. At the same time that we have a problem of saying, you know what, it's cool if we call a meeting and waste each other's time for an hour or so and not get anything done, and we just go about it. When you take the agency of interpersonal power, when you take that dimension, again, I can go to Andrew and say, Andrew, neither one of us like the way our meetings run. We don't like them. It's not doing it for us. Let's change it.
Yeah.
Like, what would we do different? And I give some ideas and team habits about that. But Andrew and I can start that, and then we can loop Amy in. And the other thing that I want to say here is when you get outside of this, I have personal power or I have institutional power. What you can also break down is this paradigm that only the team leader, manager, or executive can solve those problems.
That's right.
And so we keep pushing trivial problems to them to figure out because it's their job. They're the manager.
That's right.
Right? Without understanding that they actually have other really big challenges that they need to solve, that if we let them do this and do that, our life would actually be better off. How about instead of waiting on the team leader to fix our meetings, we say, team leader, you go do whatever you're doing with whoever you got to do it with, because I don't want to do that.
That's right.
I'm going to run the meeting. Right. And for the next 3 months, I'm just going to run meetings. You don't have to worry about it. If you have something that you need me to say, or we need to hold space for it, let me know. But you can show up, observe the meetings, and leave. I got that.
Just the ownership that gives. It's so funny because human behavior, I guess our tendency is to blame human behavior. Like, okay, well, people aren't just, fill in the blank, or the environment. That printer is, and then you fill in the blank. And when in reality, it's like, we have brains as humans. We have brains, with the ability to act with agency. So it's so funny that we act like we need permission for everything out there. And so it's, some of it's the system, and some of it, like you said, is the lack of healthy habits. I'd love for you to talk to me about this importance of belonging. You talk about psychological safety, this sense like, if I'm on a team, like I'm supposed to be on this team. This is where I fit in. And I can picture that person in the audience, just saying like, well, hey, isn't our job enough reason for us to be together on a team? Why is belonging even a thing, or some sense of a prerequisite for any individual, as opposed to just like we have a common goal to approach?
Yeah, so a common goal to approach is one aspect of belonging. Like, we're here for a shared purpose.
Yeah.
All right, that's one piece of it. But another piece of it is I feel appreciated and valued on this team. So that's another piece. And the third is I can trust my teammates. And by trust in this case, I don't mean the moral sense of lying, cheating, stealing, and gossiping, although that happens at work, right? I'm talking about the basic thing of where I can trust, I can count on Andrew's word and he can count on mine. And that if stuff gets hard, we're going to have each other's back, right? And so, yes, we could just show up and be transactional and just be like, oh, here's my widget for you. You do your widget, you hand me my widget. But as soon as work doesn't work, we don't have enough glue and relational rapport to come to each other and solve that. And that's where the blame comes from.
That's right.
That's where it's like, well, I gave you 3 widgets and you gave me 2 and 2 of yours were busted. And we go into all sorts of things about widgets and things versus being like, look, Andrew, like, I know you're doing your best, but that's not like, we got to change something up because that's not quite enough, right, to do that, or we got to change something. And it's not about Andrew and Charlie. It's about the process. It's about the pattern. It's about the habit. And when we have strong trust that way and strong belonging that way, we can have those conversations, right? Because, if you've ever fought with your best friend, I fought with several of my best friends, and sometimes it was literal fighting. We knew at the end of the day that whoever walked away with the black eye, we were still going to be hanging together. Like, we worked whatever it was out. Now, that's a very guy thing. I understand that, right? Yeah. But it's not just guys that do that, right? You know that you can go through some stuff together and walk out on the other side, right? And be just fine. And so belonging, look, you can have performance without belonging. You cannot have high performance without belonging.
Dang, that's good.
And so choose it. If you just want to like hand somebody a widget and have them hand you a widget and that's just all you want to do, cool, right? But understand you're not going to be on one of those high performing teams that really wins, changes the organizations, changes the industry, and that you can look back over the last however many years of your life and say, you know what? I didn't just go to work. Like, we made things happen together, and I remember that squad. So, yeah, you can have performance. You just can't have high performance without belonging.
So good, Charlie. I love that, and you can hear it. Hopefully, in the second layer of this conversation too, is that it's bringing the humanity back to it all. You talk about high performance, but also there's a sense in where, hey, like, we're all humans, and what happened to trust, and what happened to relying on each other. I so love another element that you've brought into this too, which is kind of getting off of our own backs. One of the things that you talk about is this creation of a new language to kind of encapsulate and transfer that meaning quickly. And you've totally done this with this term, rocket practice. Talk to me a little bit about what rocket practice is.
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of listeners have heard some of the things that I've said today, and they're like, well, I've read that in 18 business books. That's nothing new. Right? It's not hard to understand, Charlie. True, it's not. And that's the good thing. It's hard to practice. So it's not rocket science. It's rocket practice. Now, the thing that, as I've been talking more about rocket practice and team habits, I've learned to address more is why it being simple actually makes people not pay attention, right? Because they assume it's going to be easy. They assume it's nothing worth talking about. They assume that it's just a given that they're going to do that. So I'll give you another sort of good team habit. Take 5 minutes at the end of every meeting, just bracket it off to capture next actions with each other. And not just what actions need to be done, but who owns those actions.
Yes.
Okay. You've heard some version of that before, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Is your team doing it? Is it doing it consistently? Or do you get to the end of it and it's like, well, we're at time. I guess we got to reschedule something else. And then where did that meeting go? Like, oh, Andrew, I'll follow up with you about that. Why do I got to follow up with you about when? We got to schedule a whole ass another meeting to talk about the things that came from this meeting and end up with that same pattern again. It's funny, but it's real. It's real.
True.
This is
so
right?
true.
And so that sort of thing, like, what if you just practice that one habit for the next month or quarter, however long it took to stick? What would happen? One.
That's right.
At the end of a meeting, somebody would be fired. And by somebody, I mean, like, whenever I see a task list, it's like, oh, we need to do this, or these are things that need to be done. What we've done is hired somebody, but somebody never does anything, right? Specific people do specific things, right? And so that random somebody ghost that's supposed to do something no longer lives on your team. And you can get real. And I do this with my team a lot because they're like, oh, yeah, we need to do this. I'm like, okay, so there's 5 of us. I'm not it.
Yeah.
She's not it. That was not it. You're not it. Oh, turns out nobody is going to do this, right? Oh, you're going to do that. Well, what are you going to give up? Because I know off the top of my head that you're full up already.
That's right.
You're fully committed before this meeting. So if you walk away with this meeting with more stuff to do and you were fully committed before the meeting, are you not going to do the things you had? Are you going to do no, how's that going to work? So you get to have real conversations like that just from that one simple habit of getting to the end of the call and taking that swirl of a conversation and say, who owns the next step of this and when can we hear back from you?
Yes.
About that, and not necessarily hear back from you that it's done. You can say, hey, Andrew can say to Charlie, and it could be a perfectly good team practice, say, look, I don't know how long that's going to take to do, but I'll take a think on it and get back to you in 3 days and give you an idea of the scope of the project and what I can do and what that's going to look like. Guess what? Andrew still owns the ball. He's still going forward. The rest of us don't all walk away wondering what's next. And we also don't do that thing that's leading to burnout, actually, which is we all take an inordinate share of the responsibility of doing the thing, regardless of whether it's our job or not. And then we think on it, we walk on it, we do some research, we do all sorts of stuff, and then like Andrew comes back and is like, oh yeah, I have a complete plan for it, here's what's going on. And you're like, why did I spend 3 hours doing that then? Because you didn't indicate who was doing it. That one team habit of taking 5 minutes at the end of a call to really capture next actions can prevent that whole cycle. Hard to understand? No. Hard to practice? Yes.
Golly. Dang, Charlie. It really, I hope the audience hears the humanity brought back in here, this idea of filling the gap with trust, bringing the humanity back to a conversation where it's like, yeah, I want to treat you like you're not just a black hole of tasks that we dump into with no end. You know, there is capacity, but also, yeah, let's have those accountability conversations to make sure that you can actually handle what's going on here. Just some of these really, I mean, it's so common sense, but, to your point, they only work to the degree that we actually do them. So I would love, okay, one maybe kind of final question or something to riff on before I let you roll. But I'd love your take on, after the pandemic happened and, meetings are collectively affected. And for the person that is feeling like, man, I was on a roll in 2019 and just the last few years, for whatever reason, have broken my habits, broken my team, and not broken like we can't find our way, but we're just trying our best to kind of have healthy behaviors, pick the pieces back up, find our way forward. I know there isn't a one size fits all, but have you seen any kind of commonalities emerge over the last year or two of like, okay, yeah, this is a theme I'm seeing happen here, and this is probably some good ideas collectively moving forward?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm real big on your decision-making team habits because that's one of those things that during the pandemic, we didn't talk about it as a decision-making team habits changed, but all of a sudden, for instance, one bad team habit that happened was many teams adopted the, like, we decide everything together all the time because things are so fluid. Right. Yeah. And over the last 3 years and change, it's like, who actually owns that decision and how does that get made? And what can I do without taking it to the group? And what can I not do? And it's just super murky, which just adds additional mental overhead to the work. And the thing about teamwork is every action is a social action. And I know that sounds obvious, but when it's not just about the decision Charlie is going to make for himself, but the decision Charlie is going to make that affects Andrew, there's an additional social layer and there's an additional emotional layer that gets added to that mental decision. So it's just heavier. And so going back, I call it the levels of decision making. So you have level 1, level 2, level 3 decisions. I could do this briefly. Level 1 decisions are decisions that someone can take or make on their own without telling anybody else. Just make it. Level 2 decisions are decisions they can take or make, and they need to tell somebody else. I should say actions they can take. I'm trying to be shorthand here. And then the third level 3 decisions are decisions they can make or actions they can take, that they can't take. Let me replay that.
Good.
Level 3 decisions are decisions that people can't make and actions they can't take without running it by the decision maker, hopefully with a recommendation or an intention or some sort of solution. Just taking the time as a team to say, you know what, let's pause from the whirlwind. Let's pause from just all sort of wondering what's going on and say, you know what, Andrew, your job is marketing. That's on your title here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the decisions you can make on your own, and you just don't need to tell us. You don't need to fill up the Twitter stream, or you don't need to make our Slack channel a Twitter stream of everything you've done today. What are those things that we really want you to do or decisions to make? But tell us about it because it's important. And what are those things that you can't do? And why? And let's talk about that. And what if we did that for all of our jobs and be like, oh, damn, Andrew, I've been holding one of your decisions for the last 3 years because things got crazy and we just made it happen. I think this is yours. That will allow Andrew to come back and say, hey, Charlie, that's cool. But also, I've got this thing that I think it's yours. Or I've got this thing and I don't know whose it is because it was Amy's, and Amy hasn't been with us for 3 years.
Yeah.
We might actually need to hire someone or stop doing that thing, right? So that we can do our actual damn jobs, right? And so just going through there, because that's another one of those sneaky team habits, using the levels of decision-making that will unlock so many other things, because it will reinforce role clarity. It will reinforce collaboration and when you go to talk to people and when you don't. It will cultivate and reinforce autonomy so that you don't have to be in random Slack threads all damn day just to get anything done. So that one thing, like the broken printer, it's the opposite of the broken printer. It starts to unlock so many different things. It gets you out of meetings. It gets you out of random communications and over-communicating, just because you'll know whose job is what decisions they can make, and that if they're doing something that you need to know about, they will let you know. Just imagine how much work that takes off our shoulders. And, you've mentioned it throughout here. Part of what's happening in the business landscape is we become very mercenary with organizations, because a lot of organizations will cut you, layoffs, all the things that happen. So we don't like being treated like an interchangeable cog from the organizations. But what we do is treat each other like cogs that are just replaceable. We do the very thing to our teammates, those 4 to 8 people, that we hate when organizations do to us. And so my point is hey, we can't change what's going to happen at echelons above reality. We can't change what the marketplace is going to do. We can't really affect our budgets depending upon our role. But what we can do is show up and make work better together. We can show up and take care of each other. We can show up and make work suck less just by what we do with each other, irregardless of what happens to outside of our team. And if we did that, belonging goes up, performance goes up, but also even when you don't win together, you could come together and say, you know what, we tried. We tried with our full hearts. We did it. It didn't work out, and that's okay, versus being well, it was Charlie's fault because he didn't do a thing. That's and so for us it really is be the change you want to see.
Yeah.
If you want to have a high-performing, high-belonging team, you need to show up as a teammate and do that yourself. Someone has to lead here. Why does it have to be someone else?
Geez, Charlie, hopefully everybody hears that so much about limit removal, sideways energy removal versus doing more things, trying harder, working more. All of that is just a fresh way to look at how to naturally have good things show up for people. And by the way, it's the things that we all want to do as well. So the book is Team Habits, and man, you just pour your heart and soul into this. It absolutely shows. I'm super grateful to have you hang out with us today and talk about it a little bit. How would you like for folks to connect with you and just kind of catch up with you and find out what you're doing?
Well, first, thanks so much for having me. If you're interested in this conversation, want to hear more, go to betterteamhabits.com. You'll learn more about the book. It really is a great place to start because it gives many more practical, simple team habits. But as you know, now by the end of this call, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's going to be easy. So you can find me there. If you're interested in my broader work around productivity and doing your own personal best work, you can find me at productiveflourishing.com.
That's perfect. Charlie, I so appreciate this. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Thanks a bunch.
And our thanks to all of you for listening. If you're looking for a quick way to make our day, a review in iTunes or subscribing to this podcast would mean the world to us. Our thanks to Small Pond Productions for sponsoring. And this was The Pro Guide. Learn from leaders, change your life. See you, everybody.